Very,
Yes, two ways.
yeah,
There's a habit where
he is. Yeah, they moved, they put it. It wasn't really one of the parents, and you asked them to just be.
Good evening. Let's call the meeting of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority Board of Directors to order.
Director Kenneth, not present. Director Flower.
Present.
Director Annable. Present. Director Chapman.
Yes.
Director Alexander. Present. Director Potter.
Here.
Director Gill, not present.
At this time, are there any members of the public who have an opportunity to address the board on any item not on the agenda? Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Any public comment?
There are none.
Okay, all right. And at this point, the announcement regarding the items because discussed in closed session will be made prior to closed session.
Good evening, Madam Chair. There's one item, we're gonna go into closed session on conference of real property negotiator, the details are on the agenda. And then at the end of the meeting, reconvene to closed session with 2 additional items, public employee evaluation and conference with labor negotiator.
Thank you. So at this point, we will convene in closed session. All right, we're back. Is there anything to report from closed session?
No reportable items, Madam Chair, just know that we are reconvening again.
Thank you. All right, at this point, I'm gonna really go on about public comments. So do we have members of the public that would like to speak tonight? Okay, thank you. All right. All right, next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes.
I'll move to approve. Second.
No choking allowed. Okay, so we have a motion by Director Kennett and a second by Director Slaughter to approve the minutes. Call roll.
Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Flaher,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annabelle. Yes. Director Alexander. Yes. And Director Potter.
Yes.
Right. Motion to approve the minutes passes unanimously. All right, and next is the approval of the consent calendar. We have one item on the consent calendar. I don't think we need to worry about pulling anything. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar?
There are none.
Okay, all right, so motion to approve the consent calendar. A motion by Director Potter,
Second.
and second by Director Alexander. Roll call.
Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Flaher,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annabelle, Director Alexander. Yes. Director Potter.
Yes.
Right, and the motion for the consent calendar passes unanimously. All right. New business, so. Public hearing and presentation of the post fiscal year 2023-2024 budget, annual work plans and position pay plans. So this is the official opening of the public, okay, yeah, I gotta read my script right here, opening the public hearing. And then we'll take any questions from the board and open the floor to the public.
Thank you. Good evening, directors. Justina Payne, Fiscal Services Officer. Tonight, we're excited to present to you the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget and annual work plan. And so before we begin, we'd just like to provide a quick rundown of tonight's presentation. I'll begin with providing a review of the authority's funds and the projected fund balances by the end of this month. Before I turn it over to our general manager and the rest of the leadership team to present the work plan, themes and priorities for next fiscal year and highlight some of the projects and the work we're looking to deliver to the public next fiscal year. We'll take a short break to freshen up our minds so that when we come back, we'll be ready to digest some numbers and review who will need to be on the team and how much it'll cost to move our work forward. And so, to start with an overview, the authority mainly draws money from to pay for expenditures from 4 funds. District 1 is a benefit assessment that the board approves to levy each fiscal year. It brings in approximately 4.2 million per fiscal year. Oftentimes the expenditure that it covers includes salaries, non-discretionary costs, some capital purchases, acquisitions, land management and stewardship expenses, as well as any public communications. Measure T, which is the successor to Measure Q, is a parcel tax. It brings in about 8 million per year, and it can pay for expenditures that are outlined in the expenditure plan. And that's namely in 4 categories. Category 1 is for land protection. Category 2 is related to any projects for water resources restoration and protection. Category 3 includes stewardship and environmental education, as well as capital improvement, public access. And the last category is to fund the grant program, the urban program. And then we also have a reserve. This is an unrestricted fund. It was created following the resolution of the lawsuit over District 2. And in 2013, the board had approved the reserve fund policy, and it actually kind of segmented the reserve into a capital reserve as well as an operational reserve. And what it was in the operational reserve, we set aside, the board committed to setting aside $14 million as kind of a rainy day fund. And then the remaining balance that's left on it at the time was then considered the capital reserve. And it would pay for capital improvement projects, purchases, as well as acquisitions. And then lastly, a last fund that we draw money from, it's a funding source of our grants. And so this one is a restricted fund. It was basically created to set aside any grant monies that we received for specific projects. And they have strict guidelines on how we can spend it and for what purpose. And so we set that money aside. So kind of that's an overview. I can take a quick pause, see if there are any questions regarding the type of funds that we draw from before I continue.
Anyone, any questions?
Okay, so of those funds, how much are in there? So each fiscal year, when we don't spend 100% of the revenues that we receive, we basically retain that surplus, we bank it into what we call each fund's carryover balances. So think of carryover as the balance that we've saved up over the years. In District 1, we project that by the end of this month, June 30th, we'll have about 9.1 million in there. But of that 9.1, about 2 million is committed to the 20% funding program. And that only means that we have about 7.1 available for the type of expenditures that I had reviewed, such as acquisition, stewardship, other projects and program costs. And by the way, the 20% funding program, that was a grant program that was established in the 5-year plan that kind of guides the District 1 expenditures. And the allocations to this program is calculated from a formula. And for the past 3 fiscal years, we haven't been able to add to this balance, which was a foreseen outcome when designing the program, because eventually the operating expenditures would continue to grow as we acquire more land and consume more of the revenues. And so that balance of 2 million is separated into allocated to the jurisdictions within our entire jurisdiction. And then for Measure T, we're projected to have about 3.6 million in carryover. And of that amount, the line right below it, that's for our projects, and we also have 1 million allocated to the urban grant program since Measure T came into effect. And then for Measure Q, we're projected to have about 8.3 million, with $500,000 of that allocated to the Five Moons project, Five Moons Trail project. And that leaves the agency about 7.8 million for our projects and acquisitions. Now, with the board's recent award to 13 grantees last month, the available balance for the urban, the Measure Q portion of the urban grant program, that's about 518, a little less than $519,000. That's left in the pot to award. And then in the reserve, we have a projected balance of about 15.2 million. But as we previously reviewed, we've set aside 14 million as that rainy day fund. We also have an additional $200,000 that was an amount that was determined by the Land Trust Association guidelines that we should set aside for stewardship and legal defense of easements. And so that was also approved. It was amended to the reserve fund policy in 2017, and approved by the board to set that aside. And so that leaves us about 1 million that we dub as like the capital reserve that we can tap into for acquisitions and capital purchases. Any questions regarding our expected carryover balances? So kind of just to recap, reserve is the name of one of the funds, but each fund has carryovers. So hopefully that helps clarify our terminology for how we're using it. And then just to kind of, one of the reasons that we wanted to review carryover balances is to remind the board that, as we acquire and manage more land, our operating expenditures continue to grow despite our relatively flat revenue streams. So over the past 5 years, our non-discretionary expenses were kind of still well below our revenue. So that's kind of, you could kind of see on the fiscal year 23-24 is kind of where we kind of cross paths. But so over the, in the past 5 years, because our non-discretionary was below our revenues, we still had money left for projects and acquisitions and capital improvement projects. And then obviously we also augment it with grants. But as non-discretionary expenses kind of start to consume more of the revenues, the agency has had to utilize the carryover to kind of fund our projects and pay for it. And so as to how staff recommends to use each year, especially this year and moving forward, of how much carryover to utilize each fiscal year, I'll turn it over to Lee Rauscher, our Assistant General Manager, to kind of discuss that approach.
Thanks, Justina. Good evening, directors. Lee Rauscher, Assistant General Manager of Administrative and Field Operations. So as you just heard from Justina, we realized that at some point in the near future, if we want to continue to grow our operations by managing new lands and increasing our span of influence, our expenses are going to outpace our flat revenue sources. So with this in mind, in preparation for this year's work plan and budget, we did some careful in-depth financial analysis to explore expenses over the next several years and considered the most important projects and work that we should be focusing on to maximize impact to climate, biodiversity, and community resiliency, to people and nature, to organizational resiliency, and to agricultural sustainability. And to just ensure that we deliver the best value for the public's money. So we explored 3 scenarios that considered different levels of expenses through fiscal year 26-27 that continue to deliver the authority's special brand of exceptional visitor service and operations and maintenance, taking on additional acreage, which we expect to do very soon, and a range of impactful capital and public access projects, as well as finishing the projects that we start, though we did explore the possibility of slowing the pace on projects if needed. The scenarios ran from very conservative to what I will label responsibly ambitious. The budget and work plan staff brings to you this evening reflects a moderately conservative, or kind of right down the middle, approach that anticipates new and strategic land acquisitions, capital improvement projects aimed to increase equity, accessibility, and enjoyment at our preserves, strategic staffing changes, mostly incremental changes, by reclassifying positions where operations warrant expanded responsibilities and expertise. And Elizabeth will have more on staffing later in the presentation. The plan also anticipates strategic and judicious use of carryover, as you just heard from Justina, which are the balances received in prior years, but remain unspent. So tapping our savings account. And Andrew, would you like to add some more about funding?
I'll just do so in the context of themes, so
Sure.
feel free to finish up and then I'll take it from there.
Okay. Sorry, I thought that's where you wanted to pick it up. I will pause there and ask if there are any questions.
Okay, good evening, board members. And thank you, Justina and Lee, for laying the groundwork for the budget and work plan discussion this evening. I'd like to follow up, say a little bit more about the financial side in the context of key themes that are foundational to the agency's 2023-2024 budget and work plan priorities and the recommendations you're going to be hearing from each of the managers this evening. So I'd like to start with organizational resiliency. You can see some of the elements there up on the screen. As you heard from Justina and Lee, the OSA has taken on significant new acreage of conservation lands to manage and steward over the past 10 years. Our costs for operations and maintenance have steadily increased without a concomitant increase in revenues to address it. So that's where, as you just saw, the lines start crossing between flat parcel tax revenues that do not increase and year-over-year increases in operations costs. We are and have very effectively leveraged our local parcel tax revenues to bring in significant state and local funding for capital costs, land acquisition, development of public trails, staging areas, etc. However, there are no comparable state funds for operations. So in order to deliver the high level of service to the public that they have become accustomed to on our conserved lands, the Open Space Authority will need additional operational revenues in the coming several years for long-term financial sustainability. Staff is actively evaluating the feasibility of pursuing a revenue measure to support operations and maintenance, stewardship and restoration of our lands and natural resources, opening more lands to the public, and providing greater opportunities to connect people to nature. So staff will bring to the board for consideration in the next several months this topic of consideration of a potential funding measure. We'll also discuss that potential with you at your board's upcoming retreat later this month. In the meantime, as Lee and Justina pointed out, our budget continues to efficiently allocate the annual District 1, Measure Q and Measure T revenues, conservatively uses unspent carryover funds from District 1 and Measures Q and T to address our operational and budget expenditures. We will preserve the operational reserve and do not recommend using it unless absolutely necessary in the coming several years. Other measures of organizational resiliency that we will be focusing on in the next fiscal year include continuing to enhance our administrative systems and business practices and procedures and to improve efficiency and effectiveness across the agency. We are also focusing on succession planning and readying the next generation of leaders of the Open Space Authority. We are also looking at increasing the sustainability of our operations and facilities to reduce the agency's carbon footprint. So that's the organizational resiliency theme. I just next want to move to climate, biodiversity, and community resilience. So we are increasingly emphasizing nature-based solutions to climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resilience using natural and working lands as a tool. We are advancing resiliency actions that center nature as infrastructure to respond to more frequent and intense drought, flooding, wildfire, and enhancing climate resiliency for downstream communities. We're working with our public agency and NGO partners to fund and implement wildlife infrastructure and to seek funding for that, including culverts and wildlife bridges. Under the theme of connecting people to nature, we are designing our preserve facilities with nature in mind. Designing public access facilities that are compatible with the unique natural resources of each of these lands, the ecological processes and the plant and animal species that reside there. And you heard a taste of that at, I believe it was your last board meeting when Aaron Abear presented on Mayano Yakima Coyote Ridge as that type of example. We're also connecting the new generation of visitors to nature through public access and nature-based experiences. So that's in the programmatic area. These are experiences that are welcoming, inclusive, and support the demographics of our region. And in doing so, provide more equitable and inclusive access to nature. And then the last theme is agricultural sustainability. With the creation of a dedicated agricultural program within the Natural Resources Department, we are defining OSA's unique role in the protection and sustainability of working lands in the Santa Clara Valley, and to implement the Santa Clara Valley Agricultural Plan that we partnered with the county to adopt. We're also working with key partners like the county to catalyze actions for regenerative agriculture and climate smart farming practices on our lands, equitable access to land for diverse farmers, and enhancing food systems and food security in the Santa Clara Valley. And as you may recall, the board approved our participation in the county's climate collaborative, which is really taking off as we speak. And that's where much of this work will touch down. So unless there's questions, or can pause if there's questions, I want to turn the presentation over to the leadership team to present their priorities for their respective departments, consistent with these themes I've just gone over. And we're going to start with Public Affairs and External Affairs Manager Mark Landgraf. But before we do, I'm happy to take any questions.
You're all too quiet.
Well, it's probably too early, but as we go through some of the recommendations in the memo that the board will be asked to approve, focus on some of the numbers and the costs of things going forward. So I'm gonna have questions about that when we get to it.
Good enough. Okay, Mark, you're up.
Thanks, Andrea. Good evening, directors. As we did in the March workshop, we wanted to kick off the department work plan reports in celebration of our agency's 30th anniversary. Public affairs includes 3 program areas. Those are our community engagement and partnerships, legislative affairs, and communications. I'm going to start with 30th anniversary highlights from our communications team of Charlotte Graham, Anne-Marie Delon, and Katie Simon. So as you know, our top priority project for the entire calendar year is the celebration of our 30th anniversary, which includes expansion of our public audience. So more people are aware of our work, that they receive more information about the important climate resiliency, physical and mental health, local food security, and other benefits of nature that accrue through protection and restoration of natural working lands, and through the various ways we connect people to nature. We also promote the many ways that members of the public can engage with us. So, and I believe I mentioned this in March too, but I think it's just so cool that we've got these attention-grabbing trees. We're turning 30 while protecting 30,000 acres, growing our trails to 33 miles, have provided $13 million in funding through our urban grant programs, and can consistently exercise 3x leverage for every dollar of revenue we spend. All at a time when California's 30 by 30 initiative is featuring Coyote Valley on the cover of the Pathways to 30 by 30 document, and the importance of protecting biodiversity is consistently being recognized. We will continue to reach out to the media to promote our events and accomplishments throughout the year. We've now received 26 media hits this year. That's up from 19 back in March. And we're increasingly transcreating culturally relevant content for the ethnic media in languages other than English. I think I explained in March that transcreation is the creation of original content in non-English language rather than simply translating English content to that language. I wanted to point out here that a good bit of our broad success with the media is attributable to staff providing in-language interviews. And I wanted to particularly highlight the work of open space technician Abel Castillo, who did an interview just recently in Spanish for Univision on snake safety. It's generated a lot of interest in future stories with that outlet. And so we hope to do more stories like this featuring our own staff to do interviews. As we educate the public, we're increasingly doing our work through storytelling as a very effective way to connect people to the importance of nature and what it means for their families. In events and activities, including events like the one we had at Sprinkles Hill for Earth Day, the Bay Area Ridge Trail dedication that's taking place in August, Spina Farms in fall, and then Iona Yakima Coyote Ridge ribbon cutting and Community Day that's also taking place this fall in October. With help from a consultant, staff is developing a public-facing, interactive 30 years in review story map that will include 10 years of conservation since Valley Green Print publication. We also provide programmatic work in language accessibility through translations, our signage, ethnic media, videos, social media videos, year-end review, and then on-demand telephone assisted translation services for staff to use with visitors, or if they call it the office here. We're providing improved ADA accessibility to our website and improved signage out at the preserves that is increasingly language independent. Under community engagement and partnerships, Lena Ian has been supporting the Coyote Valley project manager with development and implementation of the community engagement goals for CV Camp, our Coyote Valley Conservation Areas Master Planning effort. These goals are to raise awareness about Coyote Valley and its value and potential to the community, create a shared vision for the future of Coyote Valley, grow a community of supporters who are engaged in the master plan process and beyond, prioritize communities historically underrepresented in the planning process through initiatives and programs that promote justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and access, or JEDI initiative. And to learn from experience and work to strengthen connections between open space authority and in legislative affairs, which is both primarily Lena and myself, also bring all the participation from our general manager and when needed other staff. We support the funding pipeline to leverage our own modest funding in support of acquisition, restoration, public access projects, and programs. We also help to advance policy that supports the protection of natural infrastructure for climate resilience, and we engage on policy to reduce threats to these resources. We increasingly work with cross-sector partners to inform efforts to protect our mission in sectors such as transportation, housing, and energy development. Recent updates to the Legislative Affairs program include that Megan Drager, our grants program manager, and I traveled to Washington, D.C. in April to meet with congressional representatives and agency staff to reinforce our request for budget funds for an ADA trail of our Coyote Valley Preserve. We request amendments to the 2023 Farm Bill that allow us to engage, buy, protect, sell transactions with the goal of getting protected farmland into the hands of farmers. We've also made trips once or twice monthly to Sacramento, visiting key legislators and state and agency staff to emphasize our requests for funding that benefit our important climate resilience and public access priorities. One outcome of that work is that the state's Coyote Valley Conservation Program, which is administered by the Open Space Authority, is currently written into state bond legislation for funding to be allocated to 30 by 30 projects in the Coyote Valley, should the bond measure be passed by voters next year. And that's what I have for my update. I'm going to take any questions.
Can you repeat that last sentence about language in a bond measure referencing Coyote Valley?
For emphasis of the house.
No, it's like, that's pretty exciting.
It is very exciting. Yeah. So this is, going back to AB 948 in 2019 that established the Coyote Valley Conservation Program and identified Coyote Valley as a landscape of statewide significance. That Coyote Valley Conservation Program is now written into AB 1567, which is the assembly version of the $15 billion climate and resources bond measure. So it's making it, actually it's passed the assembly floor and is now going to be considered in the Senate. And so specifically, the Coyote Valley Conservation Program is written in there for $30 million to be allocated to that program for administration through our agency for 30 by 30 projects. Similar language is being amended into SB 867, which is the Senate version of a very similar bond that has passed the Senate floor, and that's now being considered in the Assembly. So they're being crossed into the opposite houses. So that's moving forward. It may very well not stay at that level because that dollar amount for the total bond measure is pretty high, and so it's likely to come down. Sarah.
And Madam Chair, I might just add, we have Assemblymember Ash Kalra to thank for the assembly side, and we have Senator Dave Cortez to thank for the Senate.
That's great. So please keep us posted because that would be something to celebrate if that passes.
Absolutely.
Any questions? All of this or, no, okay. All right, thank you, Mark.
All right, I'm up. Good evening, directors. The Conservation Initiatives and Grants Management Department, responsible for much of the agency's work to directly preserve open space, natural areas, working farms and ranches. And this great work is led by Linda Kwong, our real property program manager, and Megan Drager, our grants program manager. It's just outstanding support from Isabella Pressman and Jackie. So collectively, they help secure the funding and negotiate the deals that establish new open space reserves and conservation easements. As Mark mentioned, this work is guided in part by the Santa Clara Valley Greenprint, and we aim to encompass the most biodiverse landscapes, help establish landscape linkages between protected lands for wildlife and people, and protect climate resilient green belts that are direct development to urban infill locations. And apart from direct land acquisition, we pursue other conservation initiatives in really close partnership with other departments like planning, natural resources, public affairs, to protect open space through land use and policy protections, through conservation partnerships, by reviewing and commenting on development, just ideally directing them to more appropriate locations or resulting in important mitigation measures. So that's an overview. Let's start with the grants program. Most of the grants program work doesn't actually show up in a list of work grant plan projects. It's almost entirely programmatic, and it consists of two main aims. The first is we bring in money to fund the agency to work. And as we roll into the next fiscal year, Megan and Jackie will continue to manage 14 grants, total about $25 million. This is from 10 different local, state, and private funding sources. And our priorities for fiscal year 23-24 include completing another $19 million in grant agreements. And that will largely help fund transfer of property in Coyote Valley from those to the open space agreement. A lot of the other ongoing work includes developing new funding strategies to fund future land acquisitions or capital projects. So the team is always on the lookout. There's typipally a pretty long lag between the time we submit applications and funds are received. So the grants team plans a year in advance. So line up funding for projects so we can keep things pretty steady. And they do this work in really close partnership with project managers like Lucas and his team, just to make sure they understand the projects that are in the queue over the next few years, so they can identify possible funding sources. Again, that's based on the project description, timing, and budget, funding gap, which we're trying to fill. And typically that funding gap is we aim to fund as much as we can. Most of the capital projects, because the program were funded by state funding. So we've done really, really well in the last few years. And the team, again, as Mark mentioned, coordinates really closely with legislative affairs, lobbyists, PPG, and that's to help inform grant guidelines that are coming out, so we can hopefully increase the amount and type of funding that's available to directly support our work. I mentioned this at March, and I mentioned it again. Relationship development is key to the success of Mark's work and grants program. Megan Drager has helped establish such a professional reputation of the agency, right? People know the Open Space Authority as an accountable agency. We do what we say we're going to do, and we deliver really, really compelling projects that are directly compelling. So that relationship building is just such a foundation to our successful partnerships. And again, because it can take many, many years sometimes between an idea for a project from the time the funding is actually in our accounts, that relationship building is just necessary to ensure progress in the steady stream. I'm going to tee this up for Elizabeth and just highlight that in 23-24, we're going to be seeking a new position. And but we're looking for someone to help us develop incredibly compelling proposals to fund our work and then to manage and administer successful grant applications. So working title is a grant writer. It's much more than grant writing. There's a lot of hard work managing and administering, right? This work. But as we fill vacancies in the planning department and add new staff under our natural resources program, there will be many project managers delivering more projects who will benefit from more grant funding, right? So it's pretty timely, it's pretty strategic. And the second element of our grant program, as you know, is we give money out, right, to communities to support open space close to where people work. We've got the 20% grant program, and then we have the urban grant program, which I know you're all like immersed in, right, as we evaluate programs and capital improvement projects will be good for you. Just a little bit of background again, since 1999 and our 20% grant program, we've got 21 projects totaling a little over $9 million. And since 2016, with the urban grant program, we've awarded 56 grants for total of just under $4 million. That amount is kind of the last program in this institution. This work, well, I think that's it on that, right? This is going back to you soon. And then for our real property program, the major emphasis fiscal year 23-24 is on transferring about 850 acres in Laguna Seca and the Mid Coyote Valley from host to the open space authority. So we will be the long-term owner and manager of these properties. Having site control is absolutely essential for us to do the Coyote Valley landscape. Okay. So we can connect over 1 million acres of habitat in Santa Cruz Mountains outdoor range, restore the Fisher Creek floodplain, and protect really critical riparian and wetland habitats. And this is also going to be a truly unique opportunity through CD Count to connect people to nature in what will become absolutely novel and space preserved here. The team is also focusing heavily on agricultural conservation for climate resilience. In 2024, we aim to close on the 79-acre wheat property. This is immediately adjacent to Montoya Conservation Easement. We hold the San Martin. Together, they establish a pretty good foothold, right? The basis of really important agricultural concern in that area, which is kind of a risk of exorbitant development. It's chipping away, right? A really important platform. So it's a small but really great project. Eliminates the potential for 17 or 14 units if that were something like it. And then we're working with Santa Clara County to implement our agricultural conservation understanding. We're going to come to you at the next meeting to extend the timeline on that. We're beginning to increase the amount of match funding that the county contribute towards agricultural projects for the span of the county. So next year, we're going to spend a balance of about $2.2 million to protect agricultural conservation. And then so many other partnerships. We're continuing to work with Habitat Agency to transfer the 1,861 acre Tilton Ranch into the authority's ownership. Habitat Agency holding conservation. We're aiming to complete the transfer of the Nature Conservancy's Power Road Ranch. It's 165 acres in the Power Road watershed to the Open Space Authority. That adds up to a really nice network of protected lands we have in that area. And we're patiently working at the pace of collaboration with the city of San Jose and BTA in the county to explore the Five Woods project. And it's going slow and steady, but we're making progress. And the last major element or program for real property is our conservation easement stewardship program. So we have 5,146 acres under easement, and primarily Isabella Cressman now is responsible for ensuring that there are no violations, right? And it's important on the work that also includes quite a lot of relationship. Homeowners know they have an easement on the property, they know it's allowed, it's not allowed. That's really good work. And then I'll just wrap up a few highlights from some of the other conservation initiatives planning work we do. I think the slide notes that we're working on the Planet Smart San Jose Natural Resources Plans element. It's actually approved in May, I believe, which was a huge win. It's one of the first natural working as elements associated with the city's climate action plan. And we stand ready to partner with the city to help them implement that. That could be again through CPCAM. Maybe there's Valley Oaks, we can add on the Tulare Meadows property, right? They own that property subject to our easement. Maybe we can help them identify the worst green infrastructure projects in the city or support their efforts to fund infrastructure projects. All really component. We are working in partnership with Coast and its consultants to help explore the feasibility of our credits program. So is there a way that companies can meet their carbon neutrality goals in their social? And a really exciting new project is we're going to be developing a strategic plan essentially to identify our real property and our conservation areas. So where should we be focusing our limited tax revenue and our part of future, right, to expand space reserves and achieve some of the other goals and objectives of the Santa Clara Valley. And then the last thing we're doing, we just continue to review development proposals to make sure that none of the important plans identified in pre-credit are by development, right? So we look to track everything, especially in Coyote Valley through the 48, which gives us early notice, right, of development proposals. So we kind of get it early and hopefully bring recommendations. I am happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you. The directors, Libby Schallhammer, manager of the planning improvements department. Our work this fiscal year will continue the authority's light on the land approach to planning and designing for public access, placing an emphasis on equity and accessibility to our diverse portfolio of plans, providing new opportunities to engage our community with natural and working lands, agriculture, historic and cultural landscapes, biological hotspots, and evocative landscapes. This is a new paradigm, and Matt mentioned a little bit about this, but this is a new paradigm expanding the opportunities we provide to engage people, setting the stage for educational programming and partnerships for years to come. We're working to develop multi-benefit landscapes that reflect our priorities: climate and organizational resiliency, agricultural sustainability, and promote our innate human connection to nature. This is a big year for the planning department, the planning and capital improvements department, as we hire, again, as Matt mentioned, as we hire and onboard several staff to backfill vacant positions, and we started a new internship program. We have had many big milestones, and we also have many big milestones ahead to help us celebrate the 30th anniversary year. Several of these projects are familiar multi-year efforts, leveraging the $6.7 million in outside funding that we've received, both for planning and construction costs. Additionally, we're pursuing additional funding to complete our existing capital projects and begin planning for new projects for both construction and public access. I'll highlight a few of the projects that we have in this year's work plan, beginning with CBCAM. So CBCAM master planning process envisions CBCAM or Coyote Valley Conservation Areas Master Plan, as you heard, envisions a true multi-benefit landscape. The plan will inform how we restore this vital connection to people, this vital connection of people and place in Coyote Valley, while supporting a vibrant ecosystem for years to come. By engaging partners, stakeholders, and residents in Santa Clara County, Santa Clara Valley throughout the process, together we can play a meaningful role in restoring this significant landscape for nature and people. At Rancho Cañada del Oro, we will be completing construction of a new bridge connecting to a day use area on the opposite side of Youngest Creek from our existing facilities and ADA accessible trail, expanding those facilities. And we will be kicking off a feasibility study for Blair Trails, the former Blair Ranch property, which will connect to the bridge, which is essentially the second phase of this bridge project in Dayton's area. We'll be looking at connections at their property for multi-use regional trail connectivity, including Barrier Ridge Trail. And we've been working with the County of Santa Clara to identify those trails within the property and relocate some of them as well. At Tilton Ranch, we'll begin planning for the future use and public access of the historic property, the ranch house, barns, the agricultural fields, and the adjacent open space in the property that Matt mentioned, where we're working with the Habitat Agency on a conservation easement. Through this planning effort, we'll consider public staging areas, local trails, as well as regional connectivity and connections to the Coyote Valley Conservation Areas Master Plan Study Area. And of course, even though the project will be wrapping up very soon here, we will be opening a new preserve, Maya-no-Yatma, in October. The preserve will provide 5 miles of new trail as well as dedicated Barrier Ridge Trail in its 1,800 acres. This will increase our portfolio of accessible projects, accessible properties, and include robust interpretive facilities for our educational programming. Finally, the planning department's GIS staff will be supporting all these projects, and as well as other planning and capital projects, as well as managing several critical projects to collect and share data to inform. These are shown in the work plan. But these projects will be intent is to collect and share data to inform planning, acquisitions, conservation initiatives, grant funding, and other program areas of the authority. So this work will lay a solid foundation for the authority's technical, operational resiliency into the future. You answer any questions?
I'm just gonna make a comment I continue to make and will continue to make. You guys work so much faster than cities down here. Which is impressive, you know, because I think I've been in the community and telling people about the current preserve opening up in October, and I think we're generating a lot of excitement. People are anxious. You know, I posted a picture when we were out there on the tour. I've been asked, where is it? How do we get there? You know, so I think that's fantastic. It keeps us going, and to see that come so fast, and I know other projects. Cities. Okay, thank you. My comments? No? I'm gonna make you guys talk.
I'll say some controversial topics, Steve. Good evening. Natural resources. I gave a lengthy presentation to the board, I think a month or 2 ago, so I'm not gonna belabor, what natural resources is. But I wanted to share some high level things that, of course, this is the newest department in the agency. I think we're still the smallest department as well too. So, I think at a high level, kind of growing the department to be in service of some of these themes, right? The climate, biodiversity, community resiliency. That's exactly what our little mission is. And then people and nature. It's definitely what everything we're talking about in Maya-no-Yatma, right? How do we integrate these things and make them compatible? We'll touch on organizational resiliency, and then, as Andrea mentioned, the agricultural program is going to be, sort of run through this department. So, I think a good way to think about our work is it's both projects and programs. Projects being things you see in the work plan of the course. As capital or associated kind of capital projects, and then programs is kind of like a lot of the stuff we do year in, year out, right? A lot like the field operations team is going to follow me. Most of our work is just stuff that has to get done every year, and there's just a question of how much and how fast and all that kind of stuff. So on the project side, I'll say, doing right at Maya-no-Yatma is a big deal from a habitat protection side, human experience and enjoyment. So that's something, especially in spring 24, when hopefully it's going gangbusters on the wildflowers, the people side of things, that this whole way of operating it is really doing well. So that's a big initiative. CD Camp, Nick Perry does a wonderful job of filling up my calendar with important CD agricultural components on that as well. One of the small examples of that is working on sort of short-term restoration project called the Stepping Stone Project that Director Chapman and I went out there the other day. Tour talked about that. What does that look like? What does that mean? But it's essentially a way of keeping more water in the Seca, so those beautiful migratory birds that just descend on there the moment it rains just can stay there a little longer, right? We all see it drive by there. So what can we do before CD camps sort of fully in motion? There's a lot of examples of wetland restoration, the wildlife corridor work we're doing in CD camp and through our partners with Post and Monterey Road. And then some community-based restoration projects, I like to call them. One of them is actually on the consent calendar tonight, which is a partnership project with Point Blue to not just restore parts of Fisher Creek, but to get K-12 students out there, right? I think educational opportunities. So community people connecting with the land. On the program side, integrated pest management program, David Mock, I think gave a good presentation in December, I want to say, sort of giving you an overview of controlling invasive species and doing it right. It's a heck of a thing at 30,000 acres. So credit to him for having a system, being on top of it, working with field staff. It's a big deal to manage that number, when you really think about it. So you're one person thinking about 30,000 acres, right? That's the challenge we have. So I want to highlight some of the new things in the department, some of that growth I was talking about. Very exciting agricultural program, sort of embodied by the agricultural specialist position. Elizabeth can elaborate on the timetable, but trying to recruit for that in the latter half of this calendar year, so that doing something in agriculture, whether it's applying for a grant or working for a tenant, thinking about this big picture of what's our role in this space. We have someone who can help push those ideas along. I think I remember in my presentation to the board, I think that's where we perked up the most, and that's great, and that's good feedback. So exciting to get that going, and it's great to be housed in natural resources because we do a lot of land management, the integration of ecology, wildlife corridors, and agricultural operations very much on point with that nature as infrastructure that Andrea was talking about. The other kind of new program and people that I want to talk about is the fuels management program, which is kind of that wildland fire resiliency element of how do we manage, again, 30,000 acres of that and growing in order to be responsive both to ecosystems and to the human infrastructure around us, right? So getting a person to run that at a high level. It's a program manager position, which is right below your department manager, so yours truly. So there's an element of organizational resiliency that if I get hit by a bus, there's a high level staffer who knows how to run sophisticated projects and programs, right? So really integral to that land management piece, that year in, year out work. So when we're doing habitat maintenance, whether it's field staff or my team, that it's done in a sophisticated way that's in service of protecting biodiversity and enhancing the environment. So with that, I will take any questions.
I hope you don't get hit by bus. Yeah. Any questions? Not yet. Oh, I'm waiting, Director Kenneth. Okay.
All right, good evening, directors. I'm Megan Robinson. I'm the supervising open space technician for what we call South County. So that includes Rancho Pinata del Oro and Coyote Valley open space, as well as properties such as Palisade, Diablo Foothills, Pajaro River. And I'm here with my partner, Andres.
Sorry, we have the one mic. Good evening, directors. My name is Andres Camposano, supervising open space technician for North County, which includes Sierra Vista, our biggest preserve. So my team and I are really excited about the opportunity to bring that expertise over to Moyano Yakima Coyote Ridge, where we're going to be also managing that preserve as well. All right, now we have our update. So this upcoming year is filled with exciting changes as well as recovery from the extensive storms over the past winter. The biggest changes are in our volunteer program and the opening of Moyano Yakma Coyote Ridge Preserve. Throughout the year, we'll be focusing on the opening of our fourth preserve, Moyano Yakma Coyote Ridge. With the completion of construction this summer, we will be opening the gates and welcoming the public soon after the start of the fiscal year. We hope that each and every one of you has the opportunity to come and see our newest gem that our planning team has so thoughtfully designed. The opening of this sensitive resource required us to take a deep look at how we can balance resource protection with visitor access. Working with the Natural Resource Department, staff developed a visitor management plan that relies on a combination of volunteer support and staff to ensure the highest level of protection. To achieve this level of care for the new preserves, staff developed a plan that incorporated additional part-time staff, adjusting seasonal technician hours down to 24 hours a week. These part-time aides additions will primarily focus on the duties of opening and closing the preserve, while the seasonals will help with focusing on the weekends. The division of tasks will allow our current technicians the ability to work together more often and allow for their presence at Moyano Yakma during its operational hours. Tasks for the volunteer and staff at the new preserve will focus on greeting visitors as they arrive, helping visitors acquire a butterfly pass, provide a place where visitors can ask questions about the authority in the preserve, and conduct visitor use surveys while ensuring compliance with our rules. The public access monitoring was driven by our Natural Resource Department to help determine if there are any adverse effects to the natural system of the preserve. Staff and volunteers will monitor use along the trails and record any negative impacts to the resources from visitors. Data will also be gathered to assess the compliance levels of obtaining a butterfly pass. This data will be assessed by natural resource staff and field staff to determine changes our management needs to prevent escalating impacts to the resources. After a year of collecting the data, staff from Natural Resources and Field will team together to finalize a visitor management plan for the preserve. Any immediate needs to provide protection will be addressed on a case-by-case basis throughout the year.
Great. Another project that will have an immediate impact on our operations comes from the volunteer program with the rollout of the volunteer portal. The portal will bring the authority's volunteer program to the next level, allowing for a seamless interaction for our volunteers to access reporting forms, researching information about the authority and its programs, finding volunteer opportunities, and staying abreast of the current happenings of the authority. Spearheaded by our volunteer administrator, this software platform will enhance the volunteer experience and allow staff a platform for improved communication. Look for this new experience in the last half of 2023. Another large project on the work plan is the cleanup of debris and the repair of damaged roads from the extensive amount of rain we had over the winter of 23. Over the last couple of years, we have seen an increase in climate-induced storms, of which we are expecting to only see more of. The work is primarily focused at Rancho Cañada del Oro and Sierra Vista Open Space Preserves. With utilization of FEMA funds, we hope to complete the following work. At Rancho, staff will be chipping down trees on site and repairing the Catamount Trail where a small section of the road washed out. At Sierra Vista, staff will be replacing delineators along Sierra Road that were damaged by the hurricane-force winds that were present during several of the storms, as well as repairing damage to the part of the trail where a small section of fill slid down onto the trail. All debris from the slide will be reincorporated into the road on site, and several drainage structures repaired that were damaged. Staff anticipates that the bulk of the work will be completed by September of this year. Environmental educational staff continue to develop our natural interpretation program. This upcoming fiscal year, our EE staff will be developing an interpretive program scheduled for the spring wildflower season at Moyano Yakma, where guided hikes will be offered every weekend throughout the flowering season. In addition, docents will be providing guided hikes and other exciting special events at the ridge throughout the year, such as full noon hikes and early morning heat hikes during the summer. While the attention will be at Moyano Yakma Coyote Ridge, staff will continue to provide services and resource work at all of the properties that we own and protect. Projects that will be continued over the coming fiscal year include rehabilitation of current non-wildlife friendly cattle fencing to wildlife friendly, trail maintenance at Coyote Ridge, Sierra Vista, and Rancho Cañada del Oro, yields management such as removing vegetation from access roads and clearing vegetation and shaded field breaks. Invasive species control, working in tandem with our natural resource department staff. Will continue to work on ensuring that invasive plant species are managed to allow for the healthier natural system we can provide. Road maintenance throughout the preserve system to ensure to ensure we are as prepared as we can for the coming winter. With the addition of new field staff, we'll be refining our field onboarding process. This will help to ensure a seamless addition to the teams and will allow our department to support our future environmental stewards. As well, we'll be working on the electrification of the fleet and all the field tools.
So 2023-24 will be a very busy year for all three program areas within our field operations department. We look forward to the opening of our fourth preserve and providing an unparalleled experience to the public in its most sensitive habitats within our county, while still providing high quality recreation at our other three open preserves and helping our natural resources thrive. We look forward to welcoming new volunteers and staff to assist us all and all we can do to take care of the land and our visitors, and encourage all of you to come out and visit us at Moynihan. Thank you. And do we have any questions?
Do you have any questions?
So.
All right, Director Potter, I know you had.
Mine is not a fit. So I'm impressed that you guys are both here. I'm glad you're here. Is Derek traveling under the weather or just trust you so much? You did a great job.
Thank you very much. He's on vacation. So he's coming back, I believe, tomorrow, and he helped us with these talking points.
It wasn't a coup then, okay.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So this is in honor of Kitty Monahan, Capitol, as well as Field. What about Palestine? When are we gonna get Palestine?
Question is.
Great. Great question, no answer.
Yeah.
Great job, great job. Derek would be proud.
Thank you. As you heard from Andrea, the agency's long-term financial sustainability is a priority in the upcoming fiscal year. In addition to the three financial scenarios that I mentioned earlier, leadership team worked with Justina Teen and many others to come up with what we call Vision 2035, very aspirational plan, and we are very inspired about what we think this agency can do going forward. We'll be focusing on exploring potential funding mechanisms in the upcoming months to secure our financial future. And as always, the agency will continue to use the public's money responsibly, to be fiscally responsible and leveraging our dollars outside funding wherever possible. And to match our financial security, we'll be focusing on investing in our staff, creating new opportunities for professional development, not only of technical skills, but of leadership skills as well. Don't want anyone hit by a bus. I prefer to think of it as winning the lottery, but these are possibilities, I suppose. We're committed to developing our talented team so they can continue to advance their careers with us as the agency's work continues to expand and demand a higher level of expertise as we're already seeing. We're proud to say that our diligent hiring practices are paying off. We have a proven track record of promoting from within, with 5 promotions over just this last year. And should the proposed budget be approved this evening, more slated for the upcoming year. Very excited about that. To retain staff, we'll continue exploring ways to support our folks as whole people with innovative policies and practices, such as the paid traumatic leave, which the board approved last year. And as we bring the employee handbook for review later in the fall, to bring you more innovative policies to consider. In addition, flexible work time and several work from home days as well for staff. But staff aren't the only component to a successful and successful organization and organizational stability. We look forward to working with your board to find meaningful ways for you to engage with the community and with each other, to continue to make sure you have opportunities to get your boots dirty and to contribute to the agency's mission in a way that is unique to you. And as the agency continues, as the agency takes on a broader variety of projects and our work expands in scale, complexity, and pace, we're taking a hard look into basics to make sure our light on the people approach to building policies and protocols provide the right frameworks to guide our work, provide clarity, and allow for innovation. Examples of projects that will occur in administrative operations in the next fiscal year include assessing our asset management needs to track important details of our assets, like location, maintenance requirements, maintenance records, and then researching potential software packages. Our information technology team will assess our data security and file storage to determine if we continue to house data on local servers or migrate fully to the cloud, and then develop protocols for retention, organization, and viewing the files. We aim to bring our record retention policy into the 2020s, which most other agencies have not done. And we'll be looking to find solutions to house our staff comfortably here at our headquarters and other locations. All of these projects will require participation from the agency. And of course, our Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Staff Working Group will continue to identify opportunities to incorporate these principles into our daily operations as well. Last but not least, we're looking forward to ways to reduce our carbon footprint. As you heard from Meg, the field team has largely taken the lead on electrifying our operations. Our Office of Facilities Management team plan to continue seizing opportunities to make more environmentally friendly choices when faced with repairs and purchases. In addition to the one electric administrative vehicle we already own, we plan on electrifying the fleet as we swap out new vehicles and maximize the use of those new chargers that we've installed. So administrative operations team is looking forward to the fiscal new year, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So thank you, that was terrific. As you mentioned IT and adjustments, and I was looking before the meeting through our CSDA magazine, and has a section on cyber attacks, so I just feel like I should say something about that. I might brought that up, but it is, you know, a never-ending battle, and I know we've got our authentication, two-factor, and all that stuff, and that seems it works, but what the next thing is. So as we consider all of those things that, you know, our cyber defense, as we grow, I think, and we do a lot of transfers and things that we're going to be a target. We are a target, we'll be a bigger target.
Right. We're looking forward to CSDA. CSDA actually had a 2-day webinar that was supposed to start today. And for some reason, they postponed it. But we right. But we look forward to, and I can't remember exactly the title, but it is about IT and administrative operations. So we look forward to staying up to date on what we can be doing differently.
And there is a special district in our county that was subject to an attack in the last couple of years and cost them a couple $1 million to get it online. So it's happening.
Do you require your staff to take trainings periodically? Because the city of San Jose, we have mandated cyber trainings every month. And we don't, the clerk's office is on this, like, you didn't do your training. You know.
We have not required additional training. We do some periodic trainings, but we certainly don't do them that frequently. Might be something for us to look into.
Yeah, we've been doing it for a couple of years now, so. Some of them are kind of mid, but you know, you got new, you know, new terms and new ways of doing things that, you know, it's good reminder. Any other questions?
And with that, Madam Chair, we were thinking this might be a good time to stretch our legs. If you are interested in taking a short break before we pivot to numbers, I'll throw it back to you for consideration.
Just want to stand up and stretch? Now, going, on through?
You skip out the.
No. Let's go right then. Okay, so I think we're putting this video.
Okay, so now how will we support the delivery of this work plan for next year? To recap, we expect to receive about 12.4 million in benefit assessment and parcel tax revenues between District 1 and Measure T. So those are the first first line item at the sum of District 1 and Measure T. We also expect to get reimbursed for some land management services. That's the second line, land management revenue, as well as agricultural lease revenues, which is that third line. So in a subtotal of revenues is about 12.7. We also are recommending to utilize carryover from two different funds. First one is District 1, about a little under 2 million. And with Measure Q carryover about 4.7 million for a total of about 6.6, a shy of 6.7 million. We also have some grants that have been awarded to some of the projects that are in the work plan and utilizing those funds. And we also project some interest income and some grazing lease income. Those are always subject to change depending on rates as market rates, as well as with the grazers, what they have out at the preserve. So those other income sources, we're looking at a little bit over 4.2 million. All in all, our revenue carryover and income, we plan to have about 23.6 million booked for next fiscal year. So all that revenue carryover and income will then move to pay for these different major expense categories. This is the breakdown of the proposed project. We have payroll and benefits. We also have some travel expenses, supply of consumables. One of our other big ticket items is our outside services. Those typically involve not only consultants for non-discretionary funds like an auditor and legal expenses. But we also have for acquisitions as well as for acquisitions services, fees that are related to appraisals, environmental site assessments, as well as for planning services, design and engineering, construction. So all that is encompassed into that outside services category. Then the equipment and maintenance, for example, also includes the procurement of equipment, but also the cost to maintain. And then the cost of facilities and utilities. We have another big bucket item is a fee title and conservation easement expenses as well. And we do intend to allocate $500,000 toward the urban grant program next fiscal year as well to add to the pot. So total expenses, we're looking at about 22.96 million for our total budget. And so while those numbers might takes a little bit more time to digest, hopefully a graph would be easier to kind of put together and summarize. About a third of our budget goes towards salaries and benefits. This upcoming fiscal year, we do not anticipate any election costs. And there are just non-discretionary operating expenses at about 11%. And then we also have departmental operating expenses for the program areas. And then we have project costs that are not capital projects. And then another third of our budget goes toward capital improvement projects and acquisitions. So those are our big kind of breakdown of the budget by type. And then so now I'll kind of quickly just turn it over to Elizabeth Loretto, our Human Resources Officer. She'll provide an overview of the salaries and benefits breakdown, as well as the proposed new positions for the next fiscal year.
Okay, good evening, directors. As you can see here, we're looking at, as Justina just said, salaries and benefits that represent 33% of the budget before you this evening. We'll start by talking about the benefits, which make up 8% of that total budget. While we're not looking to add any new benefits this year, we do have some increased costs coming our way that we want to make sure we've highlighted for you, costs that are coming from our benefit providers. First, CalPERS has announced an increases to our contribution rates starting July 1st of 2023. These increases are based on their actuarial reports from 2021 and the performance of the CalPERS portfolio at that time. The increase does impact both the authority's contributions on behalf of our staff, as well as the contributions the employees will be making through their paycheck deductions. But the authority's contributions will increase by 1.52% for our classic CalPERS members and by 0.21% for the newer CalPERS members. I don't have the stat in front of me, but at this point, we are more new PEPRA members and fewer classic members. The delineator was, did you enroll pre-2013? So we're like less than 10 classic members. So just to give that sense of scale. And then our medical benefits are increasing as well. The authority offers a Kaiser plan, which will have an increase of 0.55%, and a health net plan, which will have an 8.5% increase to those monthly premiums. And then the other aspect on the salary side is our agency-wide cost of living adjustment recommendation, which would be applied to all wages on our pay plan. So historically, the authority has recommended cost of living adjustments based on the March report for the Consumer Price Index for San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose for the year ending in February. Last year, we did a little modification to that recommendation, and we implemented an average of the data available for February 2022 and December of 2021. This year, we're returning to that rhythm set in place in 2014 and recommending a cost of living adjustment of 5.3%, which reflects that consumer price index data from March of 2023. We are all aware, the rate of inflation continues to be impactful for everyday items in life. And the intention of this model based on CPI is for the COLA to provide our staff with the adjustment that meets the economic impacts they are experiencing today. We have done some comparative research for the cost of living adjustments provided in some of our peer agencies. In the most recent fiscal years, agencies such as East Bay Regional Parks, Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District, and Santa Clara County Parks have implemented COLAs of 3% each year, pre-agreed to with their various collective bargaining agreements. We've looked back at our historical COLA and found that with this implementation model, the average through July of 2022 came to 3.075%. So we've kind of actually tracked on average with them. And if we move forward with the 5.3% COLA for fiscal year 23-24, that average would tick up to 3.32%. So that would be over the last 9 budget cycles average. And then if I can have the next slide, we'll start talking about the staff pieces. And so the final element is our staffing additions and our headcount. So we'll kind of take each department, have a little org chart so you can all see where they fit in. The new positions are the ones highlighted in yellow. So we'll start by looking at our field operations department. In general, our plan takes special care to respond to the public's increased desire to get out in nature, highlighted, as you've heard many times tonight, with the opening of Mayan Oyakna, as well as our continued steady increase to visitor counts across our preserves that started during the COVID pandemic and has just maintained. People found nature and they love it. So as you heard from Andres earlier this evening, we are intending to increase staffing in response to the opening of Mayan Oyakna Coyote Ridge, and are needing to provide staff to engage with the public while still being able to have skilled staff of open space technicians to accomplish their regular maintenance throughout the rest of the preserve system. The recommendation tonight for this department includes 6 part-time open space aides, which we believe reflects a creative and conservative approach to provide the most coverage at a reasonable cost. The open space aide position was first staffed back in 2018. It's strategically set as a part-time position working 24 hours per week, focused on openings and closings or weekend shifts when the preserves are the busiest. These positions, by being part-time, they do receive CalPERS retirement benefits, some paid time off benefits, but they are not eligible for the full medical dental vision package. And our field operations department, just by kind of comparison, you could say would achieve much better operational coverage with these 6 part-timers, the amount of hours we would be able to get for visitor services rather than, for example, 2 full-time open space technicians. And the other exciting thing about the open space aid positions is that they are great opportunities to bring new in their career individuals into this field, whether that's students looking for part-time work or people who want to start their career or just get curious about it. And we're very happy to share that we have 4 full-time open space technicians now who started as open space aides in these last 5 years. Next, we'll look at natural resources. We're continuing to build out the natural resources department after its first year. As Erin spoke about earlier, we have a lot of opportunities to be delivering important natural resources projects across the preserves. And this past year, we've been able to reshape some existing positions across the agency so that we can emphasize those into our natural resources needs. The new agricultural specialist position Erin mentioned earlier is a great example of how we've done that to take an existing vacancy and repurpose it for this important work. So it's not a new headcount, but represents some of that reshaping of existing staffing. But the new position we're looking at for the new fiscal year is a Habitat Stewardship Program Manager who will shepherd the new fuels management program, continue our integrated pest management work, and pretty much all things related to vegetation. And then next is our Conservation Initiatives and Grants Department, which is has the Assistant General Manager at the top, being Matt Freeman. He wears the dual purpose of AGM and Department Manager for this department. But we, as he spoke about, we're proposing a new grant writer position. Many of the projects and programs you've heard about this evening will likely to be able to apply for various applicable grant opportunities. And this new position will increase that capacity to pursue funding for projects to maximize what we can do. Specifically, a lot of these opportunities exist related to natural resources and capital improvement projects. And notably, when successful, a position like this effectively is able to pay for itself through the funding that it brings in. And then our last department to look at is our planning department. So we're looking to propose a new planning intern to round out the team. Building on the success of paid internships introduced in the current fiscal year 22-23, we're looking to create a planning intern to bring capacity to the department and continue our commitment to create new opportunities for individuals looking at those early career moments. So taking all of this into consideration, the budget before you this evening reflects the addition of 2 full-time positions and 7 part-time positions, which will bring our staffing level to 64 regular positions when fully staffed, plus additional seasonal open space aid support. And then there's, as Lee mentioned, a suite of reclassifications planned for a few existing positions across the agency. These reclassifications expand the positions to meet the agency's need and growing programs and adaptations to the challenges and opportunities ahead. But they also allow the agency to recognize the growth, dedication, and commitment of the staff who've been working in those positions and will be reclassified. Before I turn it back to Justina, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about these salary and benefit related elements of the budget. We might get some questions now.
So the number that was up there included all of the new positions and everything with the 5.3% COLA.
Yes, it did.
So I adore everything that we do here, but I feel like this is our role to ask these hard questions about budget and numbers. So I want to say that ahead of time. So the 5.3, this is in the packet. The first I saw it was in the memo.
Mm-hmm.
What's the process for socializing that number with the board prior to this process?
We, that number was reflected in the presentation to the administration and budget committee that happened in May. And we had, I can't remember if there were specific questions about the COLA, but that presentation was made, but I think that's the primary point of socialization.
And so we're now up to 55 staff positions, which is awesome. We started doing percentage increases. It's the power of compounding. So anything next year is going to be based on top of this. So this process just feels really weird to me as somebody who's worked in the public sector for a long time, and either not necessarily as a part of a bargaining unit, or I am now, but it's, you kind of know what you've got for like a rolling 3-year contract. And so as we go forward, it might be the time to start looking at that kind of dynamic rather than having our budget process bring a number forward based on the COLA, and you know, there aren't a whole lot of contracts that have a more than 5% increase right now that I'm aware of.
There are not.
They're, and I get why, because they were 3% before, so I'm not saying it's out of range, it's just we're about to go potentially ask people to dig deeper for the mission of this organization, and I want to make sure I say this properly on the record, that we have a clear and transparent process for how we do that. And so we might want to look at some sort of association also to, like, do the employees have a say? Like, some people at 24 hours might say, I really wish I had 32 so I could have healthcare. I really want to work here, but we don't really have a way for people to have that process. I mean, they can come to you and talk to their supervisor, but it's not as spelled out as it is in other agencies, so that we use as our comparables. So
yeah.
So I think having an employee voice somehow in the process is I think going to be important. It could be low in some areas too, and I trust you know about that, but I think tonight's presentation on the whole of everything we learned and how you identified the staff that are working on it, really, really good. But I do, you know, a $7 million payroll times 5.3%, and then whatever next year is going to be, it escalates, and it escalates forever through CalPERS. So it's really our role to push back and ask hard questions, I think, about some of this. I didn't know the employees were contributing towards CalPERS. So is that something new, or has it been going on for?
So great question and a little clarification. Classic members do not contribute. The Open Space Authority continues to pick up both employer and employee. PEPRA members, the employees contribute in, and it's a fairly comparable to contributing to Social Security in others, and we do not do Social Security. So.
A PEPRA member, so I'm familiar with it. But every agency has it different. So what's the ballpark percent that employees contribute?
I believe it is going up to 7.75 for PEPRA members from 6.75. It's a full percentage point on the PEPRA employees. Yeah. And if I may, thank you for the feedback on the COLA approach. I think that's definitely something we could come and have some discussion with the ABC about a new method or a new way to do it. The model was from the class and comp study in 2014 and kind of continue. Love the feedback to evaluate.
So right now we're in we negotiate with one employee, and so we're spending a closed session time doing that, and it's a much more structured process.
Yeah.
And it's very important, but it's also comparatively one position versus 54 other positions. So it just feels weird, and we have new directors now, so this might be the time to look at new ways, because it's starting to feel weird to me, and I've gulped in other meetings in years past and haven't said anything, and I just didn't want to let today pass without raising that. At the same time, I you know, again, work is amazing, so I want to make sure we keep everybody and hire even more everybody.
Appreciate it. Could I ask a question, Director Potter, to the chair? So if I hear you right, obviously the Open Space Authority is not unionized. So we wouldn't have that kind of a bargaining unit for staff. But it sounds like what you're asking or suggesting is that we have some kind of employee group that works with management on this. And then the other thing I thought I heard you say is you see it's more common at other agencies that there might be, you know, for a 5-year period, there's a 3% COLA. And then it gets reevaluated after that period. It's not every year you look at it different.
Right, I'm not sure, you know, it might be an association or just a formal. This person gathered all the employees and they had a meeting and if we like this, here's the things, healthcare is really expensive or not, we don't know. And I don't want to presuppose that we know, and I haven't heard anybody say anything, but this is our one time to talk about this before we vote on it as a group, but it's, and there are not a lot of 5-year contracts out there right now. I think with inflation there are 2 or 3 and sometimes more. But it's, and it's not always about the salary. Sometimes it's about different things. You know, we used to be in a pretty, you know, I did hear about our old building being not up to the modern standards and we've got a great new building. So we have taken steps to make this a great place to work outside of salary. But I do think we're probably very, very competitive on salary. And so it probably want to be careful we're not in the upper tier of everything, because then that there's already one agency like that in our county. We won't get them.
Thank you, Director. Yes, Director Kenneth wishes to speak.
Right.
I know.
So, still a little bit of my time. I too am concerned, ever since seeing the expenditure line going over our income line. So that's tentatively scheduled for 24, 25. And then I see all the yellow. You know where I'm going with this. I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer, but I guess that's our job. What if we don't? 24 isn't the right year to ask for more money, and what if we do ask for it, it fails? Where does that put that line with all of this? I'm sure the work's important, but do we have an exit strategy, so to speak? Potential retirements, and do they all get replaced or not? Where's the balance there? Has that been considered? Because we've been a growing agency. I understand we're still relatively. However, we are where we are. So I will keep that line in my mind when we talk about increasing skills. I don't like letting people go. But what do we bring ourselves to the point where we have to let them go?
You know, play association then.
Don't want to go there.
You just
So anyway, that's my concern.
Director Spofford.
You know, both you and Mike are hitting upon what happens to many organizations. Have great strategies of how to grow, but little or no strategy of how to shrink. Where would you prioritize when you had to get rid of significant? And I think, and I'll see this, you know, been here 10 years. This is amazing growth. And the maturity and professionalism that I see in just 10 years. What people say, what people do, the capability of the organization, how well we do our job. You don't hear us comment much. Believe me, other agencies are not that easy to get something to agree on. And it's not because we don't want to. You guys and the leadership here has made that difference in this organization. Now, yes, we're small, but if you could take what you presented to us out to the community, because I get asked, what do you guys do? And what's in it for me? And why should I continue to support you? I mean, Mark has that issue coming up at BCAC to give a presentation of what we're doing. You can't hold an audience this long and have them all awake at the end, but this is just amazing stuff. But have a strategy of how to downsize, where the priority is going down. Because the assumption is it will contract at some point and then it will expand again. Many organizations can never expand again because they had no contraction strategy. You don't want to be Debbie Downer than you, but but anyway, so when you're at the peak, where it turns down, find the path, stay sustainable.
The floor is yours.
I'm looking at page 73, which is hourly rates. I don't know what percentage of us is on the
So that is through the chair, that is a data point I don't have right immediately at hand, but I would be comfortable to wager at least a third, if not more, of our staff is at step 5. When we did our class and comp study in 2021, some of the positions got realigned, and so people who had been at step 5 for years maybe got realigned into a slightly lower step because of where the position moved to. But that is one, yeah, it's, gosh, at least a third, I would say.
Does the step, is it an annual step?
So the first, when an employee is hired, their first performance evaluation is after 6 months. They're eligible for 1 step at that point, and then it is every 12 months from then. And it is dependent on that successful performance evaluation.
And with these numbers that are being proposed, are they close to what county parks is paying for staff?
So we actually, if you compare direct salary to salary, just hourly wages, we are actually a little lower in the wage category than our comparator agencies, most of them. You know, we aim for the 75th percentile when we implement pay plan or pay plans and pay changes. But specifically county parks is typically a little higher than us in pay. However, I don't know the exact stat, but we are one of the few left. We pay 100% of the medical, dental, and vision premiums so that our employees are only paying the deductible and copay. And so the total package, we stay very, very competitive because of as well as the COLA, that being more responsive to what's really happening. I do want to just acknowledge, I know I gave you kind of that cumulative look back, but there have been in this time frame, we have done also back just in 2021, it was a 1.6% COLA. So we also have dipped when the market has dipped. I know the COVID escalation, I'm not an economist to know what that's going to look like down the road, but we have ebbed and flowed as the economy has. Thank you.
I would have to appreciate my fellow directors for a difficult conversation, because it is something when you see that crossing point, and I think it's all business in our minds, and someone should have those conversations about, do we pull the trigger on the ballot? Is it gonna work? Is the timing right? The economy and here. I'm of the belief that we don't try, we'll never know, right? So I think it's one of those things like, Andrew referred to as the butterflies in the stomach, right? Because at some point we're gonna have to take that risk. And and if it's successful, then the organization grows, and then we're planning for it, right? So I appreciate the conversations, and then instead of someone that doesn't get 100% of benefits, you guys are very, that's great. And it is a fantastic organization. You can see the pride that you guys give to your jobs, and it shows in the public. And so I think it's our job just to ask the difficult questions, make sure that we're on a trajectory that we're going to meet. We don't want to set you up and then have, like you said, have to pull back and go, oops, the picture was too rosy and now we have to do layoffs, and that would be very uncomfortable. I don't think any of us want to have to do that. We want to keep in this trajectory. This while we're still on the board. So I appreciate the questions and the information, and then I know that later on when we adjourn to closed session, we'll probably have similar conversations, but it may be worth and I think talked about this in regards to one specific contract, but it might be worth the establishment of a subcommittee that might want to take a look at, maybe work with staff and look at comparables and this type of discussion going forward as to what Director Potter was suggesting, right? Is this the right format? Maybe we take that offline and we formulate it separately, right? So that we are putting you on a path that's a little bit more sturdy, right? And one that's, loose and gravelly. Try to do everything. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Just a quick clarification. So for the other agencies that we discussed, their COLA for this year is predetermined, or we don't know what it is yet?
So we have 12 official comparator agencies that were defined in our class and comp study. So that's the pool we always go compare to. It's actually, let me see, SEIU with the county is in the middle of negotiations at the moment. Most recent proposals floating back and forth were 8%, 4%, things like that. But they're updating their website literally yesterday with new proposals. But their historical through their contract that expired in 2022 was 3%. East Bay Regional Parks is contracted 3% through 2023, again, for renewal. Kind of goes to what Director Potter spoke about with shorter contract terms so that they can also be a little more responsive to the economy. And then similar, the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District is slated to receive a 3% increase via their collective bargaining agreements on July 1st, 2023. And that was a 3% from 2021 to 2024. So those are the ones we looked at because they are kind of our most true local competitors. But I didn't pull for all 12 of the agencies.
I really appreciate the extra data and was really serious in that it just felt weird that I didn't know, because I know a lot more about my workplace. I'm a collective, I'm a union member, and not all of our, the other thing is when you look at the number, that's not the only thing that's being negotiated. So there are class changes and additional benefits or adjustments in the contributions for healthcare that are part of the package, so that they might have got 3% on this, but then they got extra stuff over here. So
Sure.
I'm actually fine with the 5.3. I do think you're going to see the county come in higher, and I'm happy to make the motion to approve this, but I do want to see some kind of an adjustment to the format. I'm happy to help with that as best I can. But the difference between 5 and 5.3 is it's like $20,000, and we made $360,000 in interest. So I just wanted to say it in the meeting and other years, it just didn't seem right. Like the skunk at the garden party, but I think you hear what we're saying, and I think the rest of the board probably feels a little bit about this as well, and so we're not trying to shortchange our staff, but we're also just trying to protect our agents, because we're gonna ones that go out and try to talk to all these other people that don't all share our passion for this mission, and we have to be able to explain what we do. So that fact about the 1 point, what was it, 1 point?
Oh, 1.6 was our very lowest that we've done.
So when you say that, then that makes, that wins the argument. So when we, but we didn't, but I'm glad we asked, because otherwise we wouldn't know. Or I didn't remember my own board meeting from.
Connor, was that you initiated that you would?
I'm gonna make this motion to approve
Committee at
this.
some point.
Happy to be whatever the chair. help me do.
Through the chair, I think the motion is just would like you to wait for that one.
Okay,
But
I'll allow my motion.
Pull back from motion. Okay.
So, if I may, I
Yes.
could reiterate. Said basically what I hope. Plan to not have to next.
What do you need from us, Justine?
Oh, just continue, just 2 more slides, we're almost done. But yes. So just to kind of, I just wanted to compare the, next, the proposed budget for next fiscal year with the current fiscal year, just to kind of give the board a sense of where numbers are standing. So we kind of talked a little bit about the salaries and benefits and what was driver in the variance. In administrative operations, the slight uptick is just more of the inflation of non-discretionary costs. In conservation initiatives and grants, the change that you see there has to do with, there are 2 large non-capital projects that are on the work plan, so the budget for those projects, but also a new procedure that the department is taking, where we're setting aside allowances for due diligence and acquisitions. Where just anything that might come through our door, we have budget set aside. And that aren't specifically assigned to an existing acquisition. So it's just more of an allowance there, so that's what caused the uptick in requesting that budget. In field operations, it kind of, I would say it's kind of stayed about the same. The change is because we kind of spun off natural resources. So the expenses that field operations department used to have for natural resources management, it has now just been kind of broken out. And so natural resources, actually the variance there, I don't have any historical data considering that it's a new department. In public affairs, some minimal expenses that were added in response to the 30th anniversary events and more translation and translated services, as well as and then in planning and capital improvements, the capital expenses have dropped with Mayan Oyakma Coyote Ridge construction costs dropping off next fiscal year. And then a slight uptick in the board budget, again, just more of inflation or just some additional the cost of some expenses. And then again, a reminder, next fiscal year, we do not anticipate any election costs for director seats. And so there's no need for the budget in that sense. In land acquisition, the budget slight uptick, that always changes based on what's in the pipeline. And so this is what's anticipated for next fiscal year, as well as capital improvement projects. Again, that variance. This current fiscal year, we saw a really high budget for that because of Mayan Oyakma, but having that drop down next year. And little to no capital purchases that meets the accounting capital threshold next fiscal year. So in all, while we are staff is recommending, or proposing a budget with total expenditures of about 22.9 million. We do augment with grants that we receive, about 3.8. So in actuality, what we use of our funds is about 19 million. So then we strive to bring that additional money in. So for this specific proposed fiscal year, for every dollar of District 1 and Measure T, we're actually bringing an additional 30 cents of leverage fund. And that doesn't even include projects where we contribute to that magnifies the impact. This is just more on our own projects and contribute to other partners projects. And so if there's any questions about the any specific line items in the budget, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, staff does recommend that the board approves the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget and annual work plan. Thank you.
Yes, Director Animal.
In looking at the numbers you just had up there, where are the electric vehicles and the electric?
So for the electrical equipment, it might not have hit the $5,000 accounting threshold to be considered in capital purchases. It would fall under the field operations department line as just operating expenses.
Electric vehicles?
I did not. If we were purchasing an electric vehicle, it would fall under the capital purchases, because I would love to have a car for $5,000 or under. But I don't believe that would be possible. Not even the used market, but this year, as I was analyzing the budget, we did not have any that hit 5,000.
And so I thought earlier slide, total budget was 22,965,000.
Yes.
Right there.
Through the chair, Justine is just showing you the net expenditures of the authority because we will bring in approximately $4 million in grants.
Thank you.
Now,
Okay.
Yeah, Madam Chair,
now.
Madam Chair, this is a public hearing, so could you open the public hearing? Take a comment and then close the public hearing.
All right, so. You have to open the public hearing, staff is presented on the item, taking questions to the board. Now we open the floor to the public. So if there are any public comments on the hearing. Okay, then now we will officially close the public hearing. Yeah. Director Potter, do you have a motion?
I do, thank you. I move approval of this item.
I'll tell you this.
All right. Now, as I said, now does this motion include the exploration of a further discussion on?
At the chair's discretion.
Yes, okay. All right. All right, so we have a motion to adopt resolution 23-38, adopting the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget under the board's supervision and control, which under the chair's discretion might include the formation of a committee to review fiscal sustainability to the future. Some sort of, and staff will give us a creative name. All right, and then so the motion was Director Potter, the second from Director Kennett. All right, so we call roll.
Director Kennett,
Yes.
Director Flaher,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annable,
Yes.
Director Alexander. Yes. Director Potter.
Yes.
All right, motion to approve the budget unanimous. All right, now we have a second public hearing. It says a time certain for 7 and we're way past that. So, all right, so then now we will open public hearings for the approval of the engineer's report and levying the annual assessment for open space acquisition and maintenance district number 1 renewal for fiscal year 2023-2020.
Good evening, directors. So annually, the board receives and approves the final engineer's report for the District 1 benefit assessment. And the engineer's report was compiled by SCI Consulting Group. And tonight we have Jeanette Heinzen, who's been patiently waiting on the call, here to address any questions regarding the report. And the engineer report does require the board to hold a public meeting and allow the public to comment on the item. So does the board have any questions for Jeanette before opening the public
Thank you for
hearing?
your patience, Jeanette. What do I have for any questions? Seeing none,
Thank you.
okay,
So now opening the public hearing for a public comment.
okay, so now we will take public comment. That's this portion of the public hearing is over. Any public comment? Yes. Okay. Now we will close the public comment and close the public hearing at this point. Oh, yeah, I'm not looking at them. Okay, so we have a motion for Director Kennett. Second. And a second for Director Alexander. That is a motion and a second. We are ready to call the roll. Okay, this is not much to read. Motion to adopt resolution 23/39, approving the engineer's report and levying annual assessment of the open space acquisition and maintenance district number 1 for fiscal year 2023. The motion approved by Alex Kennett and second by Director Alexander.
Director Kenneth,
Yes.
Director Flaher,
Yes.
Director Chapman,
Yes.
Director Annabelle,
Yes.
Director Alexander,
Yes.
Director Potter.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right. Next portion of the agenda is committee meeting summary, with which there are none. So now we are to informational reports. General Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The quick items for me, and then I'll see if the leadership team has anything else. The Open Space Authority staff continue to track the proposal by LS Power along the Monterey corridor for construction of electricity transmission facilities to enhance the grid, working closely with the city of San Jose. And this week, earlier this week, we met with the California Public Utilities Commission in Sacramento to have those discussions. So good partnership and good productive discussions happening with all the parties. And I also just wanted to mention that today I attended the Silicon Valley Leadership Group's Sustainable Growth Symposium held at Oracle. Very fascinating conversation, principally with the technology sector, but a lot of discussion about the importance of ESG, environment, social governance benefits to the business sector and technology sector, and very much interest in what they kind of phrased as a business positive, nature positive future, working on both of those simultaneously. And they had great speakers today. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm was there, and EPA Administrator Michael Reagan. So can share more with the individual board members about that meeting today, but gave me a lot of hope that there's partnerships to come between the environmental community, the conservation community, and the tech sector as we go forward. Anybody else from leadership team? Lucas?
Yeah, I can provide a quick update on my end. We were tentatively planning for early public access days on July 8th. We've decided to push that out to August 26th. So that we give ourselves a little more time to make sure the experience is perfect for the public. This is, I think, as we may have mentioned, a light public access. we won't be heavily promoting it. The idea is that it'll be primarily sent out, in the next few weeks, there'll be more information coming out, primarily sent out to people on the mailing list for the reserve. And then we will have our big splash, ribbon cutting and like the ceremony in October.
Thank you. Now you come. Any staff reports? No, because you guys probably already. All right, legal counsel.
No report, Madam Chair.
All right, board member reports. Director Potter.
Report.
No report.
Nothing left to say. Say this. Cherry season is here. And Wednesday, we took out the 3-year-old and 1-year-old to eat Zeus over in Brentwood, and they had a great time picking cherries, brooks and champagne floral varieties.
Director Annabelle, do you have a- you have a-
County parks, didn't have a forum, so they didn't have a meeting. And their plan is to name a trail.
Oh, very good. It's good. Very nice. I have a couple of things. The special district had their meeting this week and it's a presentation by Valley Water. And, it was a great presentation, but we felt it wasn't high enough level for the special district association to hear. And, so I am challenging the Open Space Authority to do a better presentation because they have volunteered with the assistance of Mark Landgraf to hold the next special district association meeting here. So Pat Carolyn knows about it, so, oh my gosh. No, the idea is that they're rotating the meetings now in person, kind of a hybrid, in-person meeting and rotating various different agencies. So it gives each agency in the special districts a chance to kind of showcase. And after, you know, the water district talked about rebate program on landscaping, that I think we can do a lot better to showcase some of the work we're doing to them. Because that was one of the, when we talked about the opening of the trail, they got very excited. They had no idea. So I think that's an excellent opportunity. I believe the next one is in September. Yeah,
It's through the chair, September 11th.
yes. So if any member of the board, it's come on in. So we'll be working on the presentation of it. The next item to update is a little bit more difficult. Attended LAPCO meeting, it was rather very long meeting yesterday on the annexation of the property in Gilroy, which has been on the LAPCO agenda for the last 2 years, and it finally came forward for possible vote. And after a very long amount of comments, the vote was actually pushed for continuance by Director Arenas, not Supervisor Arenas, LAPCO Cat. So we will be hearing it again on August 2nd. This is the Wren, and I can't explain. It's sanitary set Wren, and there's another.
High school.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know it.
yeah, it's been a contention. Basically, what they want to do is single family homes, tract homes, and there with an affordability of 15% that's divided between very low income, extremely low income, and mid-rise, and it's what percentage is low affordability in that, not very much. So it's epitome of sprawl. That's my take on it, but I just wanted to share that I think it's important again to stress the work we do. Because the comment was made by one of the members of the public that said, you know, we don't want tractors driving through, you know, public streets when you're talking about preserving agriculture. And I thought, oh my gosh, so much more work to do on what climate resilience means and the preservation of agricultural land and you know, all that. So, Anyway. So more to come on that, but if you want to take a look at go back and take a look at the meeting and look at some of the comments, there was a plethora of public comments that were over 190 letters, but not too many people attended in person. And so there was a good attendance from Bill Wright there, and I think there's a lot of new commissioners on LAFCO, so I think they would benefit from having, more conversations. So anyway, more to come on that. And that's the end of my comments. That's it. Then I will announce that we will adjourn back to closed session. And come back and then report out.
Two items on the session as I mentioned. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right. We are back from closed session. Do we have any reportable items?
No reportable actions, Madam Chair.
All right, with that, we formally adjourn the meeting. Good night.